This is your weekly tech recap with Jamal Abbott. News and insights about the tech world in plain English. Thank you for listening. You have reached episode number 9, and today we're going to be learning about a couple news items. First, it's going to be the possible concessions to complete the T-Mobile Sprint deal. Next, we'll learn about Verizon's narrowband IoT network going live. Following that, we'll hear about the WhatsApp security breach. And then we'll learn more about the U.S. Department of Commerce ban on Huawei and 70 its affiliates. Then the last story will be about Microsoft and Sony's partnership. Then we'll end this episode with Q&A. All right, so we're going to start off this first story, and we're going to hear about some possible concessions to complete the T-Mobile and Sprint deal. So this is according to Bloomberg, and there's reports about possible concessions being made to actually have this deal go through. So we learned over the last few weeks that the Department of Justice has not fully committed to this idea of T-Mobile and Sprint merging. And then one of the options is to have T-Mobile and Sprint look to change the structure of the deal in order to get this pushed through. So what's being considered at this point is a sale and the possible separation of the prepaid wireless business units. So for instance, T-Mobile would get rid of the Metro PCS brand that's currently underneath its umbrella, as well as Sprint selling the Boost Mobile and Virgin Mobile prepaid brands. With these prepaid brands combined together, they actually make up 42% of the market in the US. So this is a large part of the prepaid wireless brand. And then the other thing to note about this article is that this is common for companies seeking to merge. They're going to have to give up something in order to appease the regulators. So the story gets a little interesting now that these concessions are coming up. So initially, the T-Mobile CEO was pretty confident about how this deal being structured accordingly and that they wouldn't have any issues getting this passed with the federal government. But now with this report coming out and just some of these options that are being thrown around, we'll see what actually ends up happening. And so these are all just rumblings that are happening right now. There's nothing official up to this point, but with these concessions out there, this is actually good for the individuals that were opposed to the merger to begin with. And they were concerned that with these two companies combining together, that the prepaid market would actually go up in price. And then typically the way it works in the economics, as long as you have a decent supply of competitors in the market, that typically keeps prices down. But with 4 major wireless carriers combining into 3, and then having those prepaid brands underneath this one large carrier, there was just a little concern that this might not be in the best interest for consumers. So we're still looking into this. I'm still fascinated with what's going on here, and there's a lot of back and forth going on about what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. So we're keeping an eye out on this, and just stay tuned for more information. Our next story involves Verizon's NB-IoT network going live. So a couple of weeks ago, we learned about AT&T bringing their narrowband IoT network to the market. And now Verizon's up next, and they have officially launched this network. With this network, this is going to allow for internet-based and non-internet-based traffic to ride over this network. So examples of non-internet-based traffic would be security panels, that would be modems, that could be parking meters, all sorts of types of devices that don't need to transmit a whole lot of data. And this is what that network's specifically designed for. And then with this narrowband IoT network, one interesting thing too, as we learned in the previous story with AT&T, is the ability for these network devices to actually last longer because they're not constantly sending data and then receiving data over this existing network. So the devices will transmit when they need to, and then when it's not time to transmit, they will preserve themselves, and then that in turn saves the internal components for these network-based devices. So this is uh, really interesting. It's starting to heat up. Like we said, AT&T has their NB-IoT network, with Verizon now introducing this network nationwide, as well as Sprint testing their network, and then T-Mobile, as we learned in the previous week, was the first U.S. carrier to introduce their network nationwide. So as I hear more about narrowband IoT, and as I learn and study this once again takes me back to my times in the Air Force and how I used to troubleshoot these type of devices that were connected to regular old telephone cabling. So just to see the transition from that type of technology over to this wireless technology is fascinating, especially since I used to work on this stuff quite a bit, and it was a pain in the butt to troubleshoot some of these alarm systems and trying to troubleshoot some of these modems. But it's great to see the transition in the technology, and I can't wait to see once we have more of these devices online and in more use cases of individuals taking advantage of this network capabilities. Our next story involves WhatsApp and a security breach that was recently discovered this week. So the crazy thing about this security breach is that WhatsApp is billed as a secure platform to transmit and receive messages. So your voice, video, and the messages are typically encrypted on this type of network end to end. And then this is one of the features that the users on the WhatsApp network utilize and they appreciate, because they can have that secure conversation without having to worry about anybody eavesdropping or being able to tap into this conversation. So with this security breach, what was really crazy about this was that unauthorized software would be installed simply by somebody receiving a phone call by a hacker. And then this person doesn't even have to answer the phone call. So with that call being rang to that unsuspecting person, the hacker could gain access to personal data and access any other information that's on this user's phone. So the good thing about this is that WhatsApp quickly responded and got this fixed, and they're urging users to update their apps as soon as possible. And I've already done that on my device, so just go ahead and get that done if you are a WhatsApp user. Now, there's a few discussions out there from users of WhatsApp, and maybe some of these other non-technical users are kind of wondering, well, I thought this was supposed to be secure. How could something like this happen to this app? And the best explanation that I got about this was that when code is being developed for these applications, sometimes there's just bugs or there's just loopholes that can be exploited, and that can cause for things like this to happen. So WhatsApp is basically saying that this was like an isolated case, and this wasn't something that would have affected all users, but only to like a few isolated instances. But once again, they are urging people to update the app. So they've notified the US federal government as well as the European Regulatory Committee about this vulnerability. But there's not a whole lot of other information that's coming out about this vulnerability. So the best thing you can do is just to pay attention to the apps that you use the most, and then keep those updated continuously. If you are some of the Android users, they have the ability to do automatic updates. I believe they do also do that on the iPhone as well too. But keep your apps updated so you can get the latest fixes, the latest bugs that have been corrected, and then you don't have to worry about getting exploited if somebody happens to compromise your account and your services. This next story involves a ban on Huawei and its 70 affiliates. So as expected, the US government has banned Huawei from sourcing telecom equipment in the US. Now, they can only do this by getting prior approval from the US federal government. The ban comes after a national security emergency was declared by the White House in the effort to protect the U.S. interests in regards to information and communications. Now, Huawei states that the ban will hurt the U.S. and it's going to raise some legal issues on their ability to conduct business in the United States. With this ban being in place, Google has already made some changes and has removed Huawei's access to the proprietary services on the Android operating system. So that's the operating system that powers Android phones like Samsung phones and then like their own phones that they put out in the market. And then they also won't have access to Google services. What this will do is prevent Huawei from really being an active player in the smartphone market, especially since the Google operating system is one of the most popular operating systems in the world. I find this one very interesting, mainly because we are looking at a heated discussion and a heated battle over communications and the information services. And then you have to look at how far we've come with technology. You know, there was one point in time where we didn't have all this technology around us. We didn't have the smartphones. We didn't have the wireless networks. And then we used to do things pretty differently about 30 or 40 years ago, prior to the internet opening things up and allowing us to communicate with anyone, anywhere in the country and around the world. Even with this podcast, we wouldn't have access to this type of technology 30 years ago because it just wasn't possible. So it's gotten really political, and I'm not really a political person, but I am following the news that's happening, and the White House has been concerned about Huawei and the activities that are going on with this company, as well as some other things that are happening in their country of origin. So it's very interesting. This is getting really heated right now, and then this, you combine this with the race, quote unquote, that's going on with 5G. You can kind of see why that the US is looking to protect their interests, as they're looking to stay ahead of the rest of the nations in the world, and they want to stay that number one technology powerhouse. But so there's a lot of competition. I mean, we are definitely in a global economy right now. And then with the race to 5G and with the race to being on top of the technology in the world, really, this will set apart each of the nations. And then whoever does this technology thing right, this could have long lasting implications for the next several decades ahead. So you can see why the US is wanting to distance themselves from some of these activities with Huawei. And then you can also see why Huawei is wanting to still do business in the United States, because this is $1 billion industry that we're talking about here. So I'm not going there with the political stuff, but we will continue to follow these stories as they affect and touch the world of technology and telecommunications. The final story is another interesting one. So we have Microsoft. So Microsoft is known for their Xbox. They're known for PCs. They're known for gaming technologies. And now they're partnering up with Sony, who's known for electronics, known for gaming consoles, known for the PlayStation or the PS4, those types of devices. So these two companies are coming together to collaborate on new cloud-based gaming and artificial intelligence solutions. So with this memorandum of understanding, these companies will come together and explore how they can work together and how they can help one another to push these technologies forward. One interesting item of note is the use of Microsoft's Azure data centers to help Sony host some of their content and then provide some of their streaming services. What was also presented in this press release by the two companies was that these two companies would work together to help better develop and support the content creators in this community. So as I heard this story, I thought about how the current Microsoft CEO made the transition to bring Windows out of being a closed company, a company that only wanted to do their own thing with Windows, to now where they are a player in the cloud and then providing cloud-based services to all sorts of companies. So this partnership is really an extension of that vision. And I think the current CEO's been there for about maybe 4 or 5 years now, but this is really an extension of that vision that he laid out, which was to say, we're a tech company. We're going to be involved in the community, and it's going to be to our benefit to be the technology player out there that's going to help push the technology forward. So if you look at some of the other moves and announcement that Microsoft has made, it's been more collaborative instead of being on the attack or on the defense with some of these other tech companies. So there's been partnerships with Amazon. There's partnerships obviously with Sony, and there's just more of a collaborative effort on Microsoft's part to be a good tech community partner for the community. So I'm interested to see how this partnership is going to play out over time. But obviously, for the time being now, it's a good thing for Microsoft to have Sony as a partner, because they can utilize their data centers and then utilize their services to help Sony get their job done, which is to provide gaming and then streaming services to consumers. And then Sony benefits on the other hand too, because they don't have to worry about having to, like reinvent the data center wheel. I mean, they can leverage the strength of Microsoft and then their technology and their resources. And then so that's just one less thing that they have to worry about. Now, I'm not too sure about Sony's relationship with Amazon, but it's pretty clear that with this partnership, they're a lot more comfortable working with the Microsoft than with anybody else. And then we also know too from what we reported on here previously that Google has their own cloud-based gaming solution that's coming here pretty soon. So it makes a whole lot of sense for Sony to partner with the Microsoft and then be able to push this technology forward that much quicker, instead of either having to reinvent this wheel themselves and then try to implement these data centers and the solution by themselves. Well, why not expedite the process and then partner with somebody like a Microsoft who can get you that much quicker to provide these services and solutions? So it makes sense to me, and keeping an eye out and seeing how this is all going to play out. All right, so we are transitioning to the Q&A section. So if you want to send me a question, you have a couple different ways of reaching me. You can reach out to me on social media. So that's Jamal Abbott. You can find me on Quora, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. So I'm out there. Reach out to me and then connect with me that way. You can also send me an email. The email is jamal@thephoneguy. That's THA phoneguy.com. Shoot me an email. Be happy to answer any questions that you have about technology, customer service. We'll throw some business stuff in there too. I've been dabbling a little bit more into that. So hit me up. I'd love to answer your question. This first question comes from Brent, and he asks, can restaurants that really offer free Wi-Fi insist that you buy something, or can they call the police if you use their Wi-Fi from the parking lot? So I'm smiling here, Brent, at this question, because typically, at least from my understanding about offering free Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi is really there to give the patrons of that restaurant or that establishment like a reason to stay just like a little bit longer. So for instance, if you're in the Starbucks, you have your coffee, you have your muffin, whatever the case is, you're going to hang out there, you're going to take your time, you're going to eat your food, maybe check your email, and maybe browse the internet, maybe get a little work done. But since you're there, and since you're already using that stuff, you may want to go grab another coffee. You may want to grab another muffin. So really the Wi-Fi is there to keep the people there at the establishment just a little bit longer and so they can buy some more stuff from the place. If you are, so I'll just kind of ask this for you. If you are running a business, do you really want people just hanging around bumming off your Wi-Fi and then not buying anything if you're selling coffee or if you're trying to sell bagels? I don't think so, especially since you have to pay that bill. I mean, you're not going to want to have somebody freeload off of your stuff. I mean, it's just not good for business, and then that's going to be taking up space for somebody else that may want to hang out at your establishment and then buy a couple things. So I would say, yeah, they probably could call the police. Once again, too, if you're just there and you're not, trying to buy anything from this establishment, you don't really need to be there. I mean, that's just what I'm thinking. Now, if this individual is not wanting to comply and they still want to hang around and they want to use the Wi-Fi from the parking lot, they probably could call the police. But probably what I would do is just block you. I block you, and if you try to come on with another device, I probably have that one blocked too. So we have a bunch of devices blocked. But probably what I would ultimately do is just ask you, to either come and hang out. We would love to serve you something. You can use the Wi-Fi, as a complimentary thing. As long as you're, paying and then, wanting to do business with me. But if you're not wanting to do that, I'm just going to ask you to leave nicely. But if you continue to come and then try to steal the Wi-Fi, we're going to have you blocked and then maybe get the authorities involved because it's causing issues. So they offer the Wi-Fi, but really they're offering it as an incentive for you to hang around, buy a couple more muffins. But if you don't want to go there and buy the muffins, just leave. It's not even worth your time being there for the free Wi-Fi. So that's all I got to say about that. This next question comes from Ken, and he asks, what are the benefits of using VoIP, and that's voice over IP, versus normal phone service? So Ken, this is a great question, and this is something that I like because I work with voice over IP all the time, quite a bit. So benefits of using voice over IP service over normal phone service. One of the benefits is that voice over IP is mobile. So if you are in a fixed location like a office, that voice over IP service isn't limited to one physical location. So once upon a time back in the day, we would actually have to run physical phone line connections from point A to point B to reach your desk and then activate the phone service at your jack. With voice over IP, you don't have to worry about that. As long as your number is active on the voice over IP system, you can plug in anywhere as long as you have a data connection, and then you can have your number at that place. The other thing too about voice over IP is that this service is inherently mobile. So if you have a voice over IP client or the software or application living on your smartphone, you can literally take that with you wherever you go as long as you have an internet connection. And that also applies to with some of the newer cloud-based technologies. And then you can't get that really with normal phone service. Once again, too, it's assigned just to one specific spot in the building or in a location, and it's not all that flexible when it comes to moving around. So if I wanted to move that phone number to a different location, you would need a technician or you would need yourself to change the physical wires in that communications room to move that service from one location to the next location. Now, I would also say too, with normal phone service, one of the benefits that voice over IP has over normal phone service is that you don't have to worry about some of the older ailments to the service. So static is one of those things that kind of goes away because the phone lines that were typically underground or in the buildings, those were susceptible to interference, static, that type of stuff, and then that can cause a degradation in your service. You don't really have that with voice over IP, but also at the same time too, you have some new elements that get introduced into a voice over IP environment that you didn't have with your traditional telephones. And the last thing I would say too about the benefits of using voice over IP service is that there's this newer technology that's coming out now, or it's not coming out, but it's pretty much already out right now. It's called Unified Communications as a Service. So you not only get the phones, so not only get the voice over IP service, but then you also get a suite of communication services that complement that voice over IP service. So we're talking about an instant messaging type of service that goes with your voice over IP service. We're talking about like a team-based chat. So for instance, if you have like a sales department, if you have like human resources, or if you have like an IT department, you can group all those employees into different teams, and then those teams can chat with one another using the team-based chat, and then they can collaborate and then communicate using that chat platform. And there's some other things that come along too with this unified communications as a service, video calls, audio conferencing. So those are just a couple other things just to name. And then all this is like in one package, and this comes with the phone service. So that's the difference between voice over IP service and then unified communications as a service compared to your traditional telephone service. With the traditional telephone service, you pretty much have the phone, you may have voicemail, but then you don't get some of these other cool features that are present with voice over IP, which is also included in unified communications as a service. So there's quite a few features and benefits. So it all depends on really what you're looking for, but you're going to get a lot more out of your voice over IP service than you would with the traditional phone service. And the other thing too, to note, just to wrap this question up, the traditional telephone services are going away in favor of your voice over IP and then some of these other collaboration type services. So something to keep in mind, and I appreciate you asking this question. This next question comes from Michaela, and she asks, what are ways you can help improve your company's customer service? Is there a template that we can look at to see ways where we can improve? So Michaela, this is a great question. And I think it's awesome that you're looking to improve your company's customer service. I don't necessarily have a template other than just some of the things that I practice and do on a daily basis when I'm interacting with customers. But what you can do to improve your customer service for your company is just to get to know your customers just a little bit better. So let's just see what they're actually talking about, and then some of the things that they're having some issues with. So for instance, I'll give you an example. I got a call from a customer, and then he had explained how he didn't get some information about some services that were being transitioned for his organization. So I took down the feedback and I thought about this. I said, you know what? Maybe this is a way that we can improve our interaction with the customer. So what we can do is learn to find ways to over communicate with future customers. So that way the customers know that when it comes to transitioning their IT services, they're well aware of what's going on and not left in the dark. So that can be one way that you can use as a template for your own company to say, okay, let's listen to what our customers are saying. What pain points do they have? What issues do they have? And then let's find some ways that we can improve upon our own delivery of customer service based on the feedback that we're getting from the people that are using our services. Some other ways to improve customer service: have your team excited about serving the customer. Have your teams understand and realize that if you didn't have customers to serve to begin with, that you and your organization wouldn't be in business. I think that's a great incentive to want to improve the customer service because you want to be in the business of serving your customers. Another way that you can improve your customer service is just adopting this attitude of having a customer-centric culture. So surrounding your operations around the needs and the wants and desires of the customer, and getting to know your customers a little bit better. Checking in on your customers. So I find that if I'm actually checking in on my customers and then seeing how they're doing, they're more open and willing to share more things about what's going on and what's causing them grief these days when it comes to how their business is operating. So there's just a couple different ways that you can look to improve your customer service. I think it all starts first by listening and identifying what issues that your customers are having, and then also act upon those pieces of information and then look to serve the customer in that way. So once you do that, once you understand their problems, and then once you start to get some wins by actually acting upon the things that they're having some issues with, then I think you'll get some more feedback on how you can improve. So adopt the mindset of serving the customer and then serving with all your heart, and then you'll have some other ways that you can improve your customer service down the road. So I hope this helps, and if you have any other questions, definitely let me know. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of episode 9. So I am so thankful that you hung out with me here today and then let me share this news with you. And I want to get your feedback. Let me know how I'm doing. Let me know how I can better serve you. So once again, too, we just heard about getting feedback and then trying to understand your customers. You are my customers because you are listening to this podcast. So I want to hear from you. Let me know how I'm doing and let me know how I can better serve you. So you can reach me at jamal@thephoneguy.com, or you can hit me up on social media, and I love to chat. Would love to hear from you and see how I can better serve you wherever you're at. So I want to thank you so much for hanging out and tuning in to the show. Have a great day, and I will talk to you soon.